What's up, everybody? My name is Joffer, and we're going to talk about your downward facing dog. We're going to talk about all the different things that I encourage students to look for and feel into their body anytime I teach a group yoga class. It's important to know that there's lots of different types of bodies. There's lots of different shapes and sizes in which our bodies come in. Some people have long arms, short torsos, long legs. There's going to be an element of this where you have to throw all the rules out the window and just listen to what works best for your body. There really isn't an absolute. These are guidelines that I have learned over the years, that some are from my teacher training, some are from other teachers, and I've taken a collection of all the things I've been told about downward dog and adapted them to my body. And that's what I'm going to encourage you to do. When I teach group classes, I almost always start in child's pose, and then I make my way into downward facing dog. Why I often start in these two poses is because right off the bat, it's going to tell me a lot of information about each student and where they are in their yoga journey. I teach group classes that have up to 50 and 60 students in them, and it's a lot to look out for and to care for and to manage. So I use these first two shapes consistently to almost diagnose what is the level of the class that is here today, and I can adjust my sequencing and my practice to the level and experience that I can see. So in that assessment process, one of the things I notice right off the bat is spacing. Spacing between hands and feet, and then the spacing between each of your hands and the spacing between your feet. So from that first downward dog is I get people to come in towards a plank. And the reason is a lot of the times people are doing too short of a downward dog or too long of a downward dog. So sometimes you think your mat is a certain length, so people try to really spread out and take up the entire length of their mat, and you're feeling kind of spread thin and heels are really lifted off the floor, and there's a lot of pressure here on my shoulders. So this is pretty difficult. So when you come forward to plank, it's hard to actually get into your plank. Shoulders are not over the wrists. The other thing I often see is people are way too short because they think they got to get the heels down. And so then when they come forward to plank, it's too short. They have to walk the hands out. The spacing between downward dog and plank, it should be relatively the same in terms of your hands and your feet. And that's going to make a vinyasa practice way simpler for you to move through, especially if you end up in a class that's a little bit faster. Having this alignment figured out will make the practice so much easier for you. So let's quickly talk about two pieces of plank that will help your downward dog. So when you're in plank, shoulders, elbows, wrists are stacked. Yeah, so you're not too far forward, you're not too far behind. That stack of your joints gives you a lot of support. And as you step your feet back and you're in plank, there's a difference between being on your tippy toes and on your toe mounds. And so I want you to be on your toe mounds, right? We won't go too much into the details of plank because the focus here is your downward dog. So I often start classes with this. You might make a few minor adjustments and walk your feet in like a millimeter closer. But ideally, you can go back and forth between these two shapes without having to change your hands or your feet, right? So that's one thing you can look for and work out in your practice. So spacing between your hands and your feet is important. And then from there, once we settle into downward facing dog, I'll encourage students to place their feet about hip width distance apart and their hands about shoulder width distance apart. So for your feet, typically for most bodies, hip width distance apart is 2 fist widths between the arches of your feet. So it's not the outer hips that we're going for, it's your hip pointers. So that distance between the arches of your feet, 2 fist widths, is typically what you're looking for in downward dog, in plank pose, even in, say, a crescent lunge. Right? You want your feet to be those 2 fist widths apart. Otherwise, if you're on a tightrope, it's going to be really hard to balance. You're going to be a lot more wobbly. I'll actually get people to walk their hands back towards their feet, and we'll hang out in a forward fold for a few breaths, and I'll just tell them, measure right here, 2 fist widths between the arches of your feet, and that's going to be the same distance in your feet from downward dog to plank pose. Next thing we're going to talk about is your hands. Spacing between your hands. Either sometimes they're too close together, sometimes they're too far apart. Sometimes people feel restricted by the boundaries of their mat. And so they're like super narrow in their hands in relationship to their shoulders. So shoulder width distance apart is different for everybody. And for me, I actually like my ring fingers and my pinky fingers to kind of dangle off the edges of the mat. Right? So I'm in a bit more of a wider shape. It creates way more space for me across my shoulders, my collarbones, and my upper back. So shoulder width distance apart is the general rule of thumb. And then you might play around with it a bit to see what works for you. So spacing between your hands and your feet, spacing between each of your feet, spacing between each of your hands, super important. It's a great place to kind of just be curious and explore your practice. Find what feels the best in your body. And you'll know it's right for your body when you can sustain the pose without feeling extremely exhausted. You can sustain the pose for 3 to 5 breaths. And as you practice more and more, you might be able to get to 10 or 15 just calm, patient breaths in your downward dog. Now that we got the spacing figured out, the reels that I've posted on Instagram that have gone viral have involved bending the knees. And bending the knees in downward dog is not going to be for everybody. Some people will have the flexibility to keep their legs straight and their spine straight. But the priority is keeping your spine straight. So the reason why I bend my knees, I'm a tighter body. I grew up playing sports and I still like to stay active from that athletic standpoint, whether it's running or weight training or getting out on the ice and playing a little bit of hockey. So my muscles are tight, and that's okay. Tightness is what gives you power. If you want to be a fast runner, if you want to be a powerful jumper, you have to have tightness in your muscles. There's nothing wrong with being tight. There's problems with being too flexible. There's problems with being too tight. And you want to find what's balanced for you and your lifestyle that's going to help you stay limber, stay feeling good, pain-free, injury-free, all those things. I still bend my knees in downward facing dog because I don't need my hamstrings to be that long and to be that flexible for them to support my life. What bending the knees does is it's going to allow you to bring weight back into your legs so that you're not putting all the pressure onto your hands. Can you organize your weight evenly between your 4 points of contact? Let's demonstrate this for a second. Right? If my legs are straight, a lot of the times people have their legs straight and most of the weight forward into their hands. So the bend of the knees will give them the hip flexibility to draw the waistline back and lengthen through their spine. And once you have this length in your spine, you might be able to work your legs a little bit straighter. Like I can kind of get there, but this feels pretty intense on my calves, right? Not really sustainable for a long period of time. So I like to have that bend in the knee to maintain the length of my spine and to bring some weight back into my heels. So spinal length is more important than locking the knees and having straight knees. Okay. Bringing you in a little closer here now so I can talk to you a bit more about the hands. And this next part is a little bit more nuanced, but I'm going to try to explain it to you and you can practice it. Back in the day when I used to practice, they used to say, put the weight into your index knuckle and your thumb knuckle. So most of the weight is on the inseam of the hand. That's correct to an extent, but it can still be done too much, if that makes sense. The reason we would say that back in the day is because a lot of the times the pressure is on the outside of the hand, and this is one of the weaker muscles, this outside muscle of your wrist. It's kind of a weaker part of your wrist, and a lot of people would experience wrist injuries right here. And so the fix to that was to bring more weight here. Really what you want to be doing with your hands is you want to use your entire hand and every muscle that's in your hand. What this requires is not just these 2 knuckles being grounded, but you want even weight between all 5 of these knuckles pressed into the mat. And then you want to grip your fingers like you were trying to palm. I know I have weird fingers. They've been jammed a lot through playing basketball, but I use the basketball analogy because you want to feel like you could palm a basketball. it forces you to use your fingertips, and you want to grip your mat with your fingers, and that's going to engage all the muscles of your hand, strengthen your wrists, and you'll even feel the muscles around your forearms engage, which is important. This is all supporting this anatomy. I'm not an anatomy guru, but I do know grip the mat with your fingers, okay? I'm not going to give you all the anatomical terms here. So once you have that grip and that strength, I want you to notice that when you put your hand down and you grip the mat, you have equal weight between all of the knuckles. The whole hand is working. You're not just dumping the weight into the heel of your hand. Once you have that grip strength, notice without moving your hand, you can rotate your elbow. You want to find a balance between internal rotation of the forearm bone, but external rotation of your upper arm bone. If you spin the eye of your elbow too far forward, you will feel your index knuckle lifting off the mat and more weight going into the pinky finger side of your hand. Vice versa, if you rotate your inner elbow towards you, it's going to roll up your shoulder towards your ear. It's going to feel awkward. You're going to jam into your wrist here, and it's just not going to feel balanced in your hand. So you want to find a balance where you can gently rotate the eye of your elbow forward while still keeping your index knuckle down. So a great visual is if you had lasers shining out of the elbow creases, out of your elbow creases, they would make an X. That will give you a general middle ground. So you're not over externally rotating. You're not locking the joints. There's a slight bend in the elbows, but the eyes of the elbows are kind of facing towards your thumb. And in that diagonal, they'd make that X. And that's a little bit of a nuanced cue. It might take you some time to figure out, but practice it. The last thing I'll tell you is about the inner spiral of your thighs. Your inner thighs are going to spin inwards. So what can really help here is having a block and placing a block between your inner thighs. And in downward dog, what you want to feel is like you can shoot that block back behind you, almost like a Pez dispenser. I don't know if you remember those. My kids recently got one in a loot bag at a birthday party. But you want to kind of feel like you can shoot that block back, and that's spinning your inner thighs back towards the edge of your mat. And what that's doing is it's spreading across your low back, you're opening across your glutes and creating more space all in your back body here. And that's going to really help you engage your legs. If you don't have a block, I definitely recommend getting blocks at home. I'm not a huge prop guy, but blocks are very, very, very helpful and almost essential, I find, in the yoga practice. I use them all the time. I hope this was helpful for you. There's a lot in here in terms of things you can try. And remember, your body's response to any of these modifications is your number one teacher. If you cannot breathe, if something hurts, you might have to go to a physio or a chiro to figure out, hey, why do my shoulders constantly hurt no matter what I try? Why are my wrists constantly hurting? If you're getting wrist pain, don't do it. Find yoga classes where there's not that many downward dogs. Practice differently. Maybe you have to go to the weight room and strengthen your wrists and your forearms to be able to support yourself in a downward dog. Be curious about what you can do for your body and listen to your body, right? It's always telling you something. Don't force yourself, don't jam yourself, and just don't hurt yourself, right? If you get hurt in a yoga class, I like to say you probably weren't practicing yoga because the mental awareness and mindfulness wasn't there. It wasn't present. If you're aware of your breath, you will almost never, ever, ever get injured in a yoga class. I hope you found this helpful. Feel free to put a comment below if there's something else that you would like. If you've heard of a cue that I didn't explain, or that you were told to do downward dog one particular way, but it doesn't work for you, any ideas or feedback or questions you have, pop them in the comments. I watch these, I will respond. You can also private message me through Instagram if you would like. and we can have a conversation, and I'd be happy to uh, support your yoga practice that way. Thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you. Peace. Namaste.